Let's just recap for a second. We've been in this series, generosity, and if you haven't caught on, that's a T with the 4, because generosity, time, talent, treasure, and territory. If you see what we did there. So we've each week we've been able to put a piece of art on display by one of our kids or teenagers. So our first week, Paisley Evans was our artist in residence on time, and our second week it was Mason Hoffman who did the baseball picture about talent. He's a talented baseball player, so it totally makes sense. And last week my daughter Lucy was our artist when we talked about treasure, and she painted Barry, her favorite stuffed animal that she really treasures. And this week our artist in residence is Alex Klobes, who painted a lion's territory. And I think he and Paisley were the only ones that titled theirs. So we see time and a lion's territory. And Alex, actually, they're driving home from Colorado today, so they're not able to be here. So I'm not able to interview him, which I think he's just thrilled about. So, because he doesn't really want to come up here and talk on the mic. But I did get to talk to him a little bit to find out what he was thinking about a lion's territory. And he said that a lion protects its territory from interlopers. That's his word. And we're kind of like that. We're very protective of our territory, whatever our territory is. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then he said we need to let God take control of what we do with it. Very wise from Alex, and I really appreciate that. So you can't tell from far away, but Alex went into great detail here. He put right here, not drawn to scale. So that way you know that the lion in the trees, I don't know. And then he even put like, what's the thing called on a map that says like how far, it's like a legend or whatever. Yeah, he put that, so he got 5 miles and 10 miles. And so he really went into great detail. So if you get a minute to peruse our art gallery before you leave. This is the last week of the series, so they won't be hanging up here next week. But if you get a minute, come and take a close-up look. Our artists did a great job. Can we just say thank you to our 4 artists? They did a really great job participating and helping us tell the story through this series. And kids, and anybody that's got a bag or one of the pages that they grabbed back there, I want you guys to help us continue that today. Right here, here's what you see in each of your bags. This generosity, time, talent, treasure, and territory. So anybody that's got that paper in front of them, and if you still want to grab one, like I said, if you're a doodler, you like to draw, whatever, totally fine. No one's going to judge you if you get up and run to the back right now and grab that in a box of colored pencils. We even have pencil sharpeners back there for you if you're really particular about it. Kids and anybody that's got one, what I'd like for you to do is come up with your own version as we're talking today of time, talent, treasure, and territory. We're bringing it all to a close today, what we've been talking about. So we'll talk a little bit about each one. So if you were the artist for time, give us a miniature version of what you would have drawn. And if you were the artist for talent, you could give a miniature version of what you would have done. And the same with treasure, and the same with territory that we're talking about today. And kids, there's a basket on a table in the back. If any of you guys would like to turn yours in, we'd love to see some of those and maybe even put some up on the screen so we can see some of your artwork as you participate, and we really appreciate your artistry. So if you've got one of those pages, kids, teens, adults, whoever, go ahead and participate with us today and continue in that artwork. All right? We're in Matthew 25 today. If you've got your Bible with you, or you've got your Bible on a device you carry in your pocket or whatever, go ahead and pull that up or open it up. And we are going to be in Matthew 25, verses 34 through 40. Again, this may be a passage that you've heard before, something you might be a little bit familiar with. We're going to take a different kind of look at it today. Matthew 25, 34 through 40. And I'll have it on the screen as well. And on the screen, it says the version that I'll be reading out of my Bible, which is the New Living Translation. So will you stand with me for the reading of God's Word? Sorry if you just started drawing. Take just a quick break, and then you can get back to it. Matthew 25, 34 through 40. Here we go. Then the king... You notice the king is capitalized, so we know what king it's in reference to, right? This is the King God. We'll say to those on his right, Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it for one of the least of these my brothers and sisters, you were doing it for me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You can have a seat. You can hold that page if you want. We'll look back at it in a minute. There's an old joke in the Church of the Nazarene, and I'm not really a joke teller, but I'm going to give it a shot. You ready? There's an old joke in the Church of the Nazarene. It goes like this. How many Nazarenes does it take to change a light bulb? You can't change that light bulb. My grandfather put that there. Meaning, we have some sacred cows, don't we? Some things that really take on a whole lot of meaning. So you can just throw up the empty slide. I think I've got some empty slide like in between there, Rick. And that's my fault. I got Rick my slides late, so usually we practice to make sure we know where we are. So that's on me. I've run into this several times in ministry, just that joke has become a reality in my life in the church. One church where I served, we had this very large basement, and it was full of storage, and every ministry in the church had their own cage in the basement, huge cage, that was their ministry storage space, which is a gift and a curse. It's a gift. Like at this church, we're actually kind of out of storage space. We don't have any place to put very much stuff anymore. So we'd love to have a big old basement full of storage. But it's also a curse because when you have a big basement full of storage, what happens? You fill it with junk, right? So that happens at home. Well, that happened at church as well. So one afternoon, we decided to schedule a basement clean out of our cage, the children's ministry cage. And our whole children's ministry team went downstairs to begin cleaning out the cage. So we're going through it piece after piece. We're poring over it, see which items we really need to keep. We're dealing with the members on the team who are like, no, we need to keep that. Oh, wait, don't throw that away. We need to keep that. And then we're dealing with the opposite end of the members on the team that say, burn it all. Which that's me. So I don't know which one you are. If you are, what if we need that someday? We might need to build something. Or if you're the polar opposite end and you're like, just get rid of it. I'm totally a just get rid of it guy. Actually, I love it when my wife points at a pile at home and said, that pile's going to Goodwill. I have this like little miniature praise service. Oh, thank goodness. Gone. Another pile gone. Love getting rid of stuff. So by the time we get to the back of our very large storage cage, we get to this large wooden elephant. And I mean tall, huge wooden elephant. Like not to scale, but close. Huge wooden elephant. It was made from plywood, and it had holes cut in it. And the couple of us who had only been there for a couple of years and had never gotten to the back of the cage, we kind of stood there like, what in the world? We were trying to figure this out. And one of the members of our team, who had been there her entire life, came up and she said, oh, there's the elephant. And we're like, what is this for? And this was something that had been created as a game that they used at an event for many years. At a game, like a kind of a beanbag toss game, right? So the holes are in it, and you throw the beanbags on it at it, and you try to get through. So that's what this elephant had been created for. And we said, well, wait, do we still play with it? And she said, oh, no, we haven't used it in years. I said, why do we still have it? And she said, well, because the Sunday school class who made it for us in the late 1970s, I'm serious, they're still around, and they would be very offended if we got rid of it. I'm like, wait, we don't use it? No. It just sits in the back of the cage? Yes. And they would be mad if we threw it away? Yes. Okay, so what we have here is a little bit of a territory issue, because we had this 30-year-old wooden game that was made with love and care and got a lot of use for a long time, but it no longer was getting that use. And it was made by a bunch of young parents who were now grandparents, and there were a few of them. I think, honestly, it was only a couple of them that really had a hand in it. But they said, oh, you can't get rid of that. We put a lot of time and effort into that back during the Cold War. Sorry, I added that in. We put a lot of effort into that. You can't get rid of that thing. And we were kind of, okay, so we ended up filling up the cage, back with the stuff we didn't throw away, and the elephant remained in the back of the cage. We did not throw it away. It's probably still there today. So I get to wondering, is anybody territorial like that? Do you find yourself being territorial with things like that? And I have to ask myself the same question too. And I had to ask Pastor Robbie when I first got here. I said, okay, tell me the truth, because I have run into this before, and I've made the mistake of getting rid of things that were sacred. I need to know, what is sacred? What picture on the wall? If I ever think, maybe we could change that picture. And you say, no, that picture cannot move because it's got this history and this story. Well, you got to know those things kind of going in, especially when you're the new guy, right? So I made sure to ask that question because I've been burned before by not asking that question. So I know that my grandfather put that light bulb there is kind of a joke, but I had seen a little bit of truth in that. So I try to ask myself, where do I get territorial too? As we planned this particular sermon series, it felt like everything was kind of pointing towards this last sermon, this final one, because territory is like the all-encompassing message of the other three. It fills whatever areas of generosity that we've not been able to cover with time and talent and treasure. We do get territorial with our time, don't we? We only have so much of it, and so we only want to give it in certain ways. So you see how it kind of fits in that? We get the same way with our skills or our talents. We get the same way with our money. We all do it. So all of us can fit under this final heading of territory. But territory can include some things that we haven't really talked about, including our physical space, our actual territory, our home. It can include our place of work. Territory can mean things that we are in charge of, or things we care about. I would love to help mow the lawn, but my husband is very particular about the way that it gets done, and all yard-related stuff is his territory, so I'm not going to step on that. You have any conversations sort of like that at your house, maybe? Or, this is my project at work. I am the lead on it. It's going to get done my way. This project is my territory. Okay? You see how territory, you see what we're talking about here? It's kind of a metaphor territory. Or we're not really have people in our home type people. Getting into that territory just kind of makes us uncomfortable. You see how the word gets used that way too? I think a lot of territorial generosity, the whole conversation boils down to the idea of the comfort zone. Getting uncomfortable for Jesus. And we try to model this comfort zone thing, like I talked about earlier. We try to model that with our staff. Most pastoral staffs operate in what is often referred to in the pastoral ministry world as ministry silos, right? These silos of ministry where there's no connection between each one. Each one does its own thing. The youth pastor focuses on youth ministry and nothing else. That's your area. That's your silo. That's your job. Children's pastor just focuses on kids. The senior pastor is the boss. That's everyone's leader, and that's his job, etc. And here we're very different on our staff. If you hang out with us a little bit, you'll kind of get to know that we have a very different intentional kind of vibe going on. We're in each other's business a lot. While Pastor Justin, for example, gives primary care and leadership to our youth, don't be surprised to find me teaching in youth Sunday school one Sunday morning. Or don't be surprised to find Pastor Robbie attending one of our teenagers' volleyball games or whatever. It's because we're all over the place. When Robbie and I were actually talking about me joining the staff in the first place, one of the things that got both of us really excited was the mutual submission of territory. He had no desire to lead as some CEO, shelling out to-do lists to his underlings, and I had no desire to be in that sort of ministry environment. I've been in that kind of ministry environment before. Rather, Robbie said, let's lead together. I'm looking for ministry partners, not ministry employees. And I can't tell you how much I really do appreciate that. And that kind of conversation is what ultimately led to us working together here at LFC, because it laid the groundwork for our staff to lead together in exciting ways, because we've all been asked to be submissive with our territories, mutually submissive with our territory. This doesn't mean that David doesn't give primary leadership to worship arts or Justin primary leadership to youth ministry. Rather, what it means is no one has to lead on an island. No one has to be alone in their decision making. Everyone gets the opportunity to let others in. Really, relinquishing control builds bridges for partnership, and it makes what we do stronger, because more voices are helping our ministries take shape. But letting others into decisions also sometimes can be difficult, because it gets you out of your comfort zone, letting someone else speak into something that you really care about. Did you feel a little out of your comfort zone when you came in today and saw the pews? I had one or the seats, rather. We don't have pews, we have chairs. I had one particularly uncomfortable person that will remain nameless who said, "Oh, you're going to have some people feeling weird about this. You might have people walk out." I was like, if we have people walk out, I swear, we're going to have a conversation. Because obviously, no one's going to turn around and see the seats and go, "Well, I'm out of here." But at the same time, you might go, "Wait, I usually sit here. And now it's turned, okay, wait, do I still sit?" And I notice everyone's still kind of basically in their normal spot, right? For you guys, you found a way to scoot, wait, okay, so hang on. If north is this way, then and all right, then I think this is my seat. Yes, this is, I saw you guys managed to do that. But the whole reason we did it is because we were talking about territory, and David and I were messing with the seats this week, and we were like, I don't think people are territorial, get out of my seat. At the same time, we all sit kind of in the same general area. It's comfortable for us, right? We do it too. My family, we sit in the same place every week. So, I'm right there with you. But I know that it makes us uncomfortable if it's weird. My parents visited our church one time where I was on staff, and they sat in a longtime member's pew. And, yeah, well, this longtime member was a woman that was only in her 30s, but she'd been there for a long time. But that did not keep her from saying something to them about it. She told them, "That's where I normally sit. And that's where I prefer to sit. But I guess, since you guys are guests, I'll let you sit there. And I'll just sit here in this row behind you and stare daggers at the back of your head." And that's what happened. I was like, are you kidding me? You say that? You're saying that to a guest at our church? Well, I guess I'll let you have my seat this week. Dude, we have got some conversation we've got to have. We are getting too territorial with our seat at church. And I know that's not the case here. And actually, we've seen people that have literally gotten out of their seats and moved out into the aisles to let other people come and sit. Just a couple weeks ago, sorry to call you out, Phil and Sheila did that just a couple weeks ago, which we really appreciate. There was a new family, and they hopped up and they scooted out, and they found themselves kind of displaced, and we're like, all right, we'll help you find another seat. So I just really appreciate the willingness to just say, oh yeah, you can have our seat. Welcome. But I know that I've run into, and you probably have as well, because you guys laughed when I started talking about, we've run into other people who don't exactly feel that way. Believe it or not, Jesus came to make people feel pretty uncomfortable, right? Before he came, territory was the name of the game. God's people would literally go to war over their territory that was promised to them. Pretty sure the walls of Jericho came crashing to the ground because they were encroaching on some of God's people's territory. When God's people were in Babylonian captivity, you can hear their lamentations. They're recorded in Scripture. And because they have been removed from their territory, their land, their space, God's people were all about their space because it had been promised to them. And it wasn't just physical territory. It was also their way of life, the religious way of life. And if you messed up that way of life, there were serious consequences. Did you know in Leviticus there were a couple of priests who messed up the way that they did the burnt offering, and the Lord consumed them in fire? There was a time when towing the territorial line was what it took to be right with God. But Jesus came and he changed all of that. The physical territory that denoted God's people, it no longer carried the weight that it did before. We've talked about that before. Instead, God's people became anyone who was in a relationship with Jesus, right? Anyone who believed in him and loved him and followed him, then that's what it meant to be one of God's people. It didn't matter who your great-great-grandfather was, and it didn't matter what kind of land you owned or what kind of land you came from. The presence of Jesus changed our understanding of God's territory. And Jesus took some heat for it and died because of it. And when Jesus came, he also fulfilled that law that came out and consumed priests in fire. Well, there was no longer fear of messing up a burnt offering because Jesus came and was the sacrificial offering. And being right with God was no longer about following a strict set of predetermined rules. That's freedom, you guys. If you read some Old Testament, if you go back and do a little bit of studying and you see how strict the rules were and the freedom that Jesus brought, freedom from this strict set of predetermined rules, and instead it was about a relationship with Jesus now, there's real freedom in that. And you really start to understand the freedom when you do a little bit of biblical study. But Jesus was all about messing with people's territory, and he made religious leaders very uncomfortable. And if we're reading through today's passage honestly, we had better expect to get uncomfortable. This passage is about the final judgment, so it often gets used in those kind of judgment conversations. But it's also in conversations about the way we live our Christian life. And Matthew 28 gets used a lot because that's the Great Commission. Are you guys familiar with that? Go and make disciples. That's a really big one. Matthew 28, it's a cornerstone. But Matthew 25 is equally important because it spells out how we're supposed to treat people around us. And remember, the greatest commandment Jesus gave is love God. And the second is equally important, love your neighbor as yourself. So Matthew 28 and Matthew 25 find an equal place in our story. And it's all about getting out of our comfort zone. Did you listen to verses 35 and 36? I have the list up here, I think. Rick, right? So verses 35 and 6, there's a little visual for you. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. Some of these come more naturally to us than others. For example, having people, like for my wife and I, having people into our home is super normal for us. We do it all the time. Having people stay the night is normal for us. It would not be weird at all for you to come over to our house and be like, oh yeah, there's somebody asleep in the guest bedroom. That's just kind of normal for us. It's just kind of how we've learned to roll. So some of these don't really pull us out of our comfort zone, but others on the list, take a look at the list. Others on the list, you may see yourself going, ooh, if I had to start doing these things, that would make me pretty uncomfortable. Right? Maybe feeding someone doesn't sound that uncomfortable, but visiting someone who's sick, ooh, that pulls me out of what I'm generally comfortable with, gets me off of my territory a little bit. So what does generosity with our comfort zone look like? I'm going to tell you a true story. It's not a parable. It's real. It's actually happening right now. It's not an old story. It's a now story. It's happening in a Nazarene church right now. It's happening to a friend of mine, with a friend of mine right now. They're a young couple with a baby. And they got contacted by a faith-based organization that it's a nonprofit, and they do refugee and immigrant work in their area. And this couple got contacted. They got someone gave them their name as just this extra hospitable couple. And this nonprofit was looking for people who were willing to house refugees short term. Now, I'm not going to get political, and I don't know where you are in the refugee immigrant conversation, but I do know where Jesus is when it comes to housing strangers. Jesus and his parents were refugees. who had to flee their own country to escape persecution when Jesus was a baby. So if you think he doesn't identify with the refugees, he does. He literally lived that life with his family. And Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted." Jesus said in Matthew 25, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me in." In Luke 4, he said he was sent to proclaim freedom for prisoners, recover sight for the blind, and release the oppressed. So just a little aside of Jesus and housing strangers. So anyway, this family in a Church of the Nazarene felt the impression upon their heart as they prayed about it. They felt impressed to say, yes, let's do this. We don't know what it looks like, but we know that we are being called upon and God is saying, you got to do this. It's time to be obedient. And so they said yes to this organization, and they got a call that a family of 7, that's the first call they got, family of 7, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa needed a place to stay. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, if you're not familiar with what's going on there, they've been in unrest for years. They had a civil war that lasted for a long time. It ended in 2003, and they thought things were going to get better after the civil war ended, and things did not get better. Actually, things got worse. The regimes tightened up, and conditions just worsened and worsened, and now an estimated 4.5 million people are displaced from their homes from the DRC, and they are fleeing from violence of all kinds. Even violence from their own government, not just violence from rogue groups, but violence from their own government. The government, there are factions that are taking advantage of power. They're arresting people and imprisoning them for arbitrary reasons. There are inhumane conditions. And people are doing what we would do too, and they are taking their families and they're trying to get them someplace safe. I think that's probably how we would react if we were in that same situation. I got to get out of there, and I got to get my family someplace where I'm not going to be ripped out of my home for nothing and put in prison, and where my family can try to thrive and I can try to keep my kids alive. Said yes to letting their territory get invaded, and 7 non-English speaking people from across the world showed up on a bus at their house in November, just this last one. They had 5 children. The youngest was 2, the oldest was 13. The church came together and they helped them gather bedding, extra towels, pillows, dishes, to try to turn their home for 3 into a home for 10. Like that. They just had a couple days from the time the phone rang to the time the bus pulled into the station. The family had traveled, this Congolese family had traveled through South and Central America, literally through the jungles, to get as far as the U.S. seeking refuge. And they had been to place after place after place with nowhere to land. And the kids had picked up a little bit of Spanish. The whole family spoke French. And they got into this American household. So communication was really hard. My friends got them, tried to find jobs for the parents. They had to get the kids enrolled in school. They started taking appointments with the counselor at school because imagine, we already know, those of us that have lived it, it's hard to be 13 years old and in school anyway. Well, imagine being 13 years old and going to a brand new school in a brand new country in a culture you know nothing about, in a language you don't speak. There was a lot of assimilation problems that this 13-year-old was having, and so they started having counseling sessions with the school counselor to try to help them out. My friends, they moved their baby into their room, and they created spaces throughout the house and had to put together extra beds and everything to have everyone have a place to live, a lot of shared space. What they really didn't want is they didn't want them to keep traveling. They didn't want to be part of the long lines of jungle that they had literally come through. Instead, they wanted them to find a new home. And the people that stayed with them had nothing to offer. There was no give and take. It was just, for my friends, give. That was it. Their family was scared. This Congolese family was scared and away from everything they knew, and they were in full survival mode. They learned how to do Thanksgiving for 10, Christmas for 10, fund and buy some Christmas presents for 5 extra kids. They learned how to do a weekly grocery budget for 10. It was giving up things that maybe we're not even thinking about right now, like giving up a quiet house. Do you know, like that time occasionally where nobody has anything to do and it's like a Friday night and you're like, oh, everybody's home, and you like just can order pizza and just chill for a minute? It doesn't, maybe, you know, if you got kids, teenagers, maybe those things don't happen often, but sometimes you get this moment where you all just get to be together and be quiet for a minute. Whew, aren't those nice when that happens? Well, they gave it up because this was perpetual. It was every day, every night. It was for the foreseeable future. They didn't know how long it was going to be. They gave up their quiet house. Throughout all of this, my friend had some serious spiritual revelations, and though I say it was all give and no take, the takeaway was spiritual in nature. It wasn't financial in nature. It was spiritual in nature. She said this, and I quote her here: "We've learned that the right and good thing to do is often the hardest thing to do." Have you guys experienced that? She also said this: "Our house is not our house. It belongs to God, and we will use it however God wants to use it." What a statement. What a bold statement. Now, that's a statement any of us could make. If I wrote that down and put it outside and said, hey, sign your name under this if you believe it, I bet we could get a lot of signatures. But they weren't just signing their name under something. They were living it. For real. Now, I don't expect us all to necessarily go running out to our local refugee center. Though, if you do want to get involved, I have the contact information right there. That's our Kansas State refugee coordinator. So there are ways to get involved in similar situations just like that. But rather, what I want this story really to do is I wanted to open our eyes to what next level generosity with our territory looks like, right? Generosity with our comfort zone. Like I said, this story I just told, it's not an old story, it's a current story. The family's living this story. Actually, just this last week, they located a house less than a mile from their own, and they helped the Congolese family move in. They have jobs, the kids are going to school, the traveling and the running is over. Refuge has been sought, and it was found in the home of God's people who opened themselves up willingly to do God's work, and they opened up their own comfort zone, their own territory. And like I said, there's no financial kickback for this. No one's writing a book about them. They're not being interviewed for the local news about this. This was not easy. It was not short. It was not glorious. It was messy, but they knew what they had been led to do. I'm going to say this very slowly to make sure we get it. Our comfort zone can become an idol for us. Our comfort zone can become an idol. Our territory. I'll do that, but I still want to keep my routine. I still want to keep my normal. Yeah, God. Okay, God, I see what you're calling me to, but how are we going to do that and still do all the things we normally do, right? If I let someone encroach on my territory, whether it's physical territory or control over a situation or an area of leadership at home or at work or even my territory here at the church, then I won't get to do what I'm comfortable doing. But my friends, nothing that Jesus listed in Matthew 25 when he talked about welcoming others into the kingdom was comfortable. It was not a comfortable list. Every single one involved us getting out of our comfort zone for people. He said, I was hungry and you fed me. That's your food that you had to buy it and you had to cook it and you had to provide it. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. That's your water bill. That is your cup. I was homeless and you gave me a room. That's your house, your bed, your blankets, your pillows. I was shivering and you gave me clothes. That's your dresser, your closet, your sweater, and your shoes. I was sick and you gave me care. That's your sympathy. That's your soup, and it could be your bill at the pharmacy that you have to pay. I was in prison and you came to visit. That's your time, that's your gas money, and that's your listening ear that he's asking for. It's yours. Or is it? Is it God's? Is it God's room, God's food, God's time, God's bank account? Generosity with our time and our talent and our treasure and our territory is all about full surrender. It's all about saying to God, I want you to use everything you've given me at your disposal for your kingdom work. Did you hear what Alex Kloeb said? He's in junior high, by the way. He said this: we need to let God take control of what we do with our territory. That's a pretty simple statement, but he knew it when he started painting these lions. He knew that we are territorial. He said lions are territorial, always protecting their area from interlopers. Sometimes we are like that. And then he said we need to let God take control of what we do with our territory. Wise words from Alex. What's your comfort zone? What do you feel like you need to control? Where are you ripe for letting God take over your territory and move you to full surrender generosity? Generosity is the way of, and generosity is the way into the kingdom.